All right, we are recording. Welcome everybody to our bi-weekly Media over QUIC virtual interim. This is being recorded. This is the Notewell. I don't think anyone here is actually new. Maybe someone is. But if you have never participated at IETF before, you may not have seen this. And this just talks about the intellectual property implications of you being here, as well as some code of conduct stuff. So be nice to each other. And if you're concerned about the IPR stuff, you can send this to your lawyer. All right, as always, we are using Google Meet for audio, video, slides, queuing, and show of hands. When we queue, just use the raise your hand tool in Google Meet, and that orders everyone appropriately. The Google Meet chat is only to be used for meeting logistics. And in fact, there are two pinned messages there right now. One is to our Zulip chat, which is where any technical chat should occur. The other link is to the notes. One of you will soon be asked to be the scribe. And furthermore, all of you should go click on that link and add your name and affiliation to the blue sheets. So I'll give you a moment to do that. All right, our agenda is pretty simple. I'm gonna pre-bash it actually. Magnus is going to take, let's time box it at 10 minutes to talk about subscribe done and the fallout from that. Just very briefly, yesterday I presented sort of an either or of four things, and I think some people become convinced that actually a combination of the two is the right answer. So because Al and I are heavily implicated in this, Magnus is gonna run that talk. And then the main event is Will's going to lead a discussion about extensible object header, for which there's been a lot of momentum. And that is, I think, all we're going to talk about today. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? Okay, you know what's coming next.
Test. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can give it a shot again.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Wow. Building up a huge
brownie point.
Worth of chocolate.
You may have to bring chocolate just for Giovanni if he keeps this up, even though it wasn't an ITF meeting.
Well,
okay.
May have spoken too soon because it says the page you're looking for could not be found, and I'm having trouble getting into the. I just saw the note page, and now it suddenly disappeared.
Interesting.
Yeah. Several has managed to reach it.
Okay, I just reloaded and I'm able to get back in.
Sorry about that. It was there and then disappeared. And try one more time from the. It would be the agenda link. No.
Not the agenda link. There's if you go to the Google Meet chat, there's a link to signing blue sheets, and that's where the notes are. Or the agenda link might work too, but.
Okay. Okay.
I can't even find the chat.
You can't find the Google Meet chat?
Yeah, I mean, I see the little dialogue at the bottom here. I could raise my hand. There's a bunch of dots.
Mine is on the bottom right-hand side. There's just the second to right.
Two figures. No, next to the two figures.
There's a chat bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sign into the blue sheet. And I'm back. Okay. Also,
are you there?
Yeah. Also,
okay, add your name to the blue sheet. Okay, everyone, add your name to the blue sheets. I have some late arrivers. The link is in the Google Meet chat.
Okay.
All right, we're done. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes. So last meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed subscribe done. we were a bit rushed for time and we didn't really conclude well on that. I had to have a call ongoing. Alan had an updated. Martin has updated his PR. Alan also, I think, has updated his PR on these issues, and they've been a little bit. I asked for a consensus call on the mailing list. The only responders there has been Martin and Alan. So I wanted to check here where we are on this, if people have, there were like some considerations, etc., around this. And I actually seen on the PR that, for example, Alan Satsu was positive there. He has not joined this meeting yet, to what I can see. But it's so the question here really is have you thought about this? Have you seen? Have people have time to thought more about what we discussed 2 weeks ago, etc. And where are people seeing? Is it enough with just the timer, or does people want this kind of optional optimization? It's okay. I think that's the question that Alan proposed. If anyone has any input on this.
My hand is up. If you
Yes.
wait.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
So,
I think I framed it poorly last time as like this either or, where like we can either do a timeout or we can do all this accounting. And I think Alan made me see that it's actually, these are complementary things. Like I think there was a very strong signal, like the subscriber is going to have to do a timer anyway. Fine, there's a timer. As a further optimization, if we have the stream counting, that in the vast majority of cases will allow the client to clear its state much faster than it would with some sort of like, multiple PTO, which is a good thing. It's a trivial thing for the sender to send. There was some concern that counting is hard. I guess it is hard. Alan made the point we do flow control all the time, and that seems to work. But if you don't want to count, it's trivial from the sender side, from the receiver side. If you don't want to count, you just let the timer run. That seems like a really suboptimal thing. But that's there. So like I think that, and also if you don't support reset stream at, then that's then you're gonna have to fall back to the timer. But again, we're collapsing onto the case we had kind of where we left it last time. So I think this is a good optimization. It's not hard to implement, and I would encourage the group to adopt Alan's PR, complementary to mine, which is just the timer-based thing. Thanks.
The PR number?
So this is Alan's is 628, and Martin, yours are
609.
Yes.
To clarify, so the proposal is to merge Martin's and then Alan's on top of it. Is that correct?
It's possible that mine needs like a small tweak to make sure that it's like jives complementary, but yes.
Okay. Conceptually, I didn't mean like mechanically we can figure out the mechanics. That's fine. I just want to make sure the group knew what the proposal was.
So as because I seen that you actually had kind of approved on Alan's, I assume you have some input. We're discussing subscribe down, and if we're actually people are fine with taking both, just to get you context, both Martin's and Alan's.
I looked at the latest proposal yesterday, and that made sense to me. To have subscribe done, to say stream count will give some way to, if you don't want to have the timers, you still will be able to make use of that. If other than that, some timers are like, does not matter for me, they can still clean up the subscriptions. That sounds fine to me. Good addition. Thank you.
Okay. Any other input on this?
I guess maybe a question is there anybody who thinks it's a really bad idea?
Yes, that's a good question.
Yeah, and these PRs have been out for a while, so given it seems like we're moving forward with this and all that stuff, what is the deadline the group would like for any reviews or objections or something before I go and merge these? Like, do you want like end of tomorrow or something? Is that enough time?
I said that I said I was gonna conclude on this on tomorrow, I think, or 6th on Friday. So,
Yeah.
So I will send at the end of this meeting, I will send an update to the mailing list saying that based on today. To me, it appears that the proposal now is to take both.
Okay, I will do another editorial pass and also,
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I'll say that my PR is as good as I can make it. So whenever you're happy with it, Ian, I have no further work to do on it.
yeah, I thought your PR was basically done. So I guess I was just waiting for some collection of the chairs or something to merge it, but I can merge it right now if you want. I mean,
based on the
Take it next week after Friday
Okay.
that's fine. Yes. So
I think one thing that could use a little review is, what I've said is, it should set a timer of at least its delivery timeout. Like, obviously delivery timeout can be infinite, so that's not so great. Like, if people have, I'm a firm believer that spec should have at least numbers, like nominal defaults, for if you are not a network genius and need to put something in there. I don't really know what to put in there, and like some people said PTO, but PTO is probably not available to the application. So like, I don't know. I think an earlier version of this had 5 seconds or something like that. Anyway, if people want to propose something in the GitHub, or Ian, if you just want to make up a number, that's great. Okay, thanks.
I'm not a fan of the application, basically let the implementation choose something reasonable based on what it's doing with that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we could merge it with no suggested default. I'm not in, I mean, like I said, I like to have numbers.
I don't know.
Well, people ask why it would be unavailable, because I mean, do all QUIC and web transport APIs expose the PTO to the application?
Not sure about all QUIC, because I don't know what all QUIC expose, but web transport definitely exposes RTT and RTT-var.
Okay, great.
okay, but I think we can move on with the agenda. I will send my conclusion here is that there's no objection and several support for taking both. We will conclude on this. Last call for comments is on Friday, by Friday. Okay, Will, you're up.
Okay, I uploaded slides previously. Can you share them?
So we're not on Meet Echo, so it's not necessarily easier for us, but we can if you would prefer
I'm
that.
happy to share this side.
Yeah, just share. That's easier, probably. That way you can
hold on.
control your own stuff.
Let me just find the share button.
I actually asked you to upload them mainly because people wanted to look at them before.
Oh, okay.
not,
not seeing
not
a
because
share.
not because it made things easier.
Do I have share permissions? Because I'm not seeing a share link here.
In the bottom, you have a box with the arrow. Isn't that the share? Yes.
Nope. I have a chat. I have a hand reaction.
In the middle, next to the call and raise hand and.
I don't. I see present. It's grayed out. Presenting is not available in this version of Meet. Go to the full version to share your screen.
Okay, I think we've reached the point of this being too harder than it's worth. Let me fire this up. So many steps. Okay, there we go.
Might be that you're not logged in as you, or doesn't have a Google identity with.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm logged in as.
I'm not sure I know how to make this full screen, but
Okay, it's close enough. There's no animation.
All right.
So this is a description and discussion on PR 502 about extensible object headers. Linked the PR up there. This PR first came out in August, so it sat there for a while. Those complaining that it needed to be rebased were highly justified, but I fixed that as of today, so it's now ahead of main instead of being behind. And I have 6 slides altogether. So let me present all 6. They present different aspects. The last slide is a set of questions that I've curated from all the discussion, which I think are the primary questions. And then we can go back to the slides to try to discuss them over the material. So next slide, please. So what are object extension headers? So there's 2 reasons for it. I put one reason here is to facilitate the future evolution of the protocol without having to revise the core RFC. So you can imagine a separate RFC or another group says, here's a really useful header. We really wished we had put it in the original spec before we released it, and we want to be able to use it in a standardized way. Another use for this is actually not so much the evolution of the protocol, but just communicating information that's maybe not core to MOQT, but still needs to be read and understood by a subset of relays. A use case here would be advertising. You can imagine an edge relay that is doing the equivalent of server-side ad injection, and it doesn't need to know what's in the content, but it needs to know that this piece of content is somehow the point at which it should do an ad substitution. I'm just imagining that use case ahead of time, but that would be another case. And the 5G group have actually submitted several links and about a real use case they have for marking content for optimization during cellular delivery through a 5G network. A core principle is extension headers must be forwarded by relays and must not be modified. So even if you're a relay that knows not what to do with this header, that's fine. But someone upstream of you or downstream of you may know, and therefore you must preserve it and forward it as you received it. This also means you must cache it too. These headers are visible to relays. They're in the header component of the object, and they're intended to carry information that should be used by relays, not by the ultimate subscriber. So it's not intended to carry payload-related metadata. This metadata should be serialized into your object payload. And these headers are optional. Currently, an object must signal that it has no extensions. There are several optimization schemes. Alan's proposed one where we can by default assume there's no extensions unless signaled in a stream header, for example. That might be one way to do it. Next slide.
We have questions.
Oh,
Do we want to just let Will run through all the
sorry.
slides
Okay.
and-
Who was? I don't know. Suhas or Mo? Who was first?
Mo.
Sorry, Mo. Go ahead.
Obviously, we have an issue with the next to last bullet because the LOC media format explicitly uses these extensions for payload-related metadata. And we are very resistant to bearing all of this as object payload because it is not payload. It's metadata about the object, but it's not payload.
So
Let's
I
clarify what
would
the purpose of the extension header really is. Is it only for relay? It's not, it has nothing, no relation to the actual payload?
please this only clarifying questions now until we've gone through the slides. Then we go back and discuss. I think this is clearly the topic of discussion.
Suhas, you have a clarifying question?
I'll come back later. No problem. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what does the serialization look like in our object stream, for example? We currently have on the left-hand side there an extension count saying how many extension headers there are, and then a series of extension headers. A value of 0 means that no extension headers are present. This does take up a byte. On the right-hand side is the serialization of the header itself. It's a type length value with a special case, which was suggested by Cullen and which I implemented, which for certain reserved types, in this case 0 to 20, and we can debate the range, those types are followed by a single variant, right? So there's many use cases where that's all you need is a number. Types 21 and above are a length and a value. And again, these are the serialization is then defined by first parsing the type. Any clarifying questions? Yes, Alan.
Maybe this is on a subsequent slide, but are the headers per object or are they per subgroup?
Currently, they're per object. We might want to talk about subgroup optimization. I can clearly see like signaling how many extensions there are as something we could move to a header if in fact it's consistent, right? But you would have to say only one of your objects out of 100 has a header. Now, do you have to signal them all, or can we signal an exception to what was put in the header? We'd need to figure out how to do that.
Also, is this purely for object subscribe or also for fetch?
This would be for fetch too. These objects are agnostic as to how they're being retrieved.
So it probably couldn't really be for a subgroup thing then, without very easily.
Yeah. Well, you could know if you're sending them as a subgroup. You could.
Yeah.
You're having to construct your headers on the fly anyway. So
it's not very clean, but it could work. But all right, got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can worry about the compression or like reducing the overhead, but conceptually they're for every object gets some.
Every object has a notion that, because the metadata you want to put there might only apply to that object and no other objects. And we need to create a mechanism for just signaling it for an individual object if we want to allow that. Otherwise, we say you must do it for subgroup. Next slide. So during the setup, there's a negotiation. Parameter key 02, I actually had to bump this to 03 after the rebase. Doesn't really matter what it is. There's a requested extension parameter where the subscriber basically gives a set of these type numbers. The number is just a type, and it says, I would like you to support, and there's an issue around what support means, say 3, 6, and 19. And it's optional. If it's not present, there's no request. And the server then responds currently with a message requested extension parameter, the same name, and it responds with the sub list of those that it does support. So you ask for 3, 6, 19, it only supports 19, it just responds with 19. In a special case, if it doesn't support any, it got a parameter length value of 0. And this is per hop, we should note. So even though you can ask the next person on the hop if they support a certain set of these extensions, there's no way to propagate that desire down the chain. I think Martin was.
Yeah. So so is this a relay? Is this like a local publisher to local subscriber signal? What's contained in these extensions, or is this a original publisher to?
This is hop by hop, so it's any node talking to any other node. There's one subscriber, one publisher.
So you would envision relays like creating these extensions, not just forwarding them.
I envisage a original publisher adding the extension. I don't envisage any other node adding them, although
okay,
maybe there's a workflow where intermediate nodes do add these for some reason, and we shouldn't explicitly prohibit that. And nothing in the design prohibits that.
But in general, if you want something to happen here, you're going to have relays essentially aggregate these requests upstream,
which is tremendously ugly from an architecture point of view. Like say you have 1,000 people and they all ask for different combinations of extensions, and you want to go forward, you can now almost gonna have to go forward with the same number of requests as you received.
And last thing I'll say, at the risk of discussing, maybe setup is not the vehicle for this if that's what we're doing, because you're gonna have to update it. All right, thanks.
Suhas.
I asked the question about the support, which I'm still not clear, but clarification question here is that in your example, when server responded just 19, and if the publisher still published 6, what is the expected behavior in that case?
I would think, again, there's a notion that maybe we missed it in slide number 2, which is relays must forward and must not modify. So yeah, it's going to get 6 as well, but what it really cares about is that 19 will be there.
Right, like I'm totally okay with like support being, we can define it later, but as long as we don't prohibit from, just because you did not advertise support from the server, you don't forward it, that would breaking a lot of use cases. So I just want to make sure that
So
we don't.
no, it's
Okay.
in fact the first thing with the question we're going to debate is, do we even need this whole
Yeah.
negotiation? I don't think we do. I think it's close to pointless. But
Cool. Thank
it's great to get there. I think it was Gwendol and then Mo. Can't hear you, Gwendol.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mo was before me, but
Oh, sorry.
it's but I mean, this is something like it's the same for me. I don't understand what is support, because if the relay forward all the extension anyway, and the publisher will not send the object with all the different extensions. So what is the need for support? What is the use case behind? I'm not clear about it. What does it mean actually?
Maybe that's not a clarifying question.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
Mo.
Yeah, can you clarify what you meant on the previous slide then about cannot modify? I took that to mean that the entire extension, blob cannot be modified, which means can't add, remove, touch anything in the whole thing. So with this, I was surprised to see this, because this implies that relays can actually author or remove. Maybe modify is clear that you shouldn't substitute something that came in with something different going out, but this seems like it opens the door to modifying the whole blob by adding and removing individual extensions. Is that the intent? Or
Yeah, my intent is that you cannot modify, meaning you cannot remove or change the contents of headers that you received. That doesn't prohibit you from adding on additional headers and propagating those forward. But you can't say header 3 comes. If you want to add header 3, you can't. You can't overwrite a header that you've received. But if you want to add a header 4 while preserving header 3, I think that should be allowed.
thanks. That's a very important clarification. I didn't get that at all from this.
And I didn't clarify it, so it's a good question. Okay. Next slide. Oh, no more question. Next slide.
Who's advancing?
I don't see it yet. There we are. So I define an IANA table called mock extension headers. The name can be changed later. And we've sharded these out based upon whether it's for standards used or whether it's for general application usage, like the example of an ad system or a 5G network, etc. Or maybe 5G is close enough to be standard. So 0 to 20 were the ones reserved for standards with a varint value. 21 and 127 standards with a non-varint, in other words, an ad hoc value, but also where a space is at a premium. 128, 16,383, where space is less of a concern, and then 16,384 and up. First come, first served for non-standardization usage. This was suggested by Cullen, and I used his numbers, but I think there's open to do. I think only 0 to 20 for varint is far too small. I would actually grow that up. We got a lot of room here. We can talk about that. Suhas.
I think it's a clarification question. I think that should be in hex values. If not, it should be 0 to 32.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Assume
Then
there's a 0x in front of those.
Oh.
Well,
Thank you.
Looks like a mix of decimal and hex.
Yeah,
It
it
is,
is more.
yeah.
Thanks.
The idea is we shard our numbers, please. Okay. And then slide 6. I've attempted to catch the major questions. So number 1, is the requested extension useful since it can only be negotiated hop by hop? This 2 was proposed by Alan. It's a strange, if we do keep it, it's a strange name to have requested extension. Could we just do available extensions or come up with a different name like extension negotiation? Question 3, this is adding a byte to every object. So can we put it in a stream header type, for example? Again, a proposal from Alan. 4 with the IANA registration. I think this came from Magnus. Space be greased or any particular picking algorithm. And then 5, there's a 5G suggestion for a slightly different TLV format from what's proposed. And we might want to look at those. So these were the questions that I think that required resolution and had not been sufficiently resolved in the issues on the PR. Victor.
I was. Is this the last slide? Because
This is the last slide.
Because I was wondering when we're going to the discussion part.
Yeah, so I think let's go to the discussion part.
Okay, I think I have 4 points. The first point, I think the most important, is that I've not seen any specific use cases presented on this slide. And this is problematic for 2 reasons. 1, well, we need to understand why we want this. And 2, I feel like if we had specific extensions in mind that we want to add, this would make it easier to answer a lot of questions as to how the extension should behave. Now, the second point I wanted to make is that the most important thing about those extensions is that those extensions should be only relevant because when something needs to be told to the relays in the middle and not to the endpoints, because anything that is only relevant to the endpoints is application payload, and it should go to application payload. And there is no need for relays or MOQT stack in general to know about that. Another thing is I do not understand about extension negotiation is why is it done per hop and not per subscription, given that in general, like my impression is that MOQ subscriptions are the end-to-end unit, and since objects are delivered end-to-end, then I would expect the negotiation to be performed end-to-end. And I guess my last question is, how much overhead this introduces in the default case when we use no extensions?
Okay, I have some answers to those 4 questions. On the first one around use cases, there is a pretty detailed use case. That link there on the differing in TLB format, it contains a detailed use case in the 5G distribution. And I don't want to describe it in detail because I didn't understand it completely, but it is documented and it seemed highly relevant. So there is one specified. The original issue, I think, and I forget who opened it, also specifies a use case that was deemed necessary. 433 is the issue, and it came from Cisco, so from Cullen. So Cullen might also have use cases in mind for Cisco. So I think there are some. Question number 2. I wrote here not go to the endpoint. I think that's very interesting. You want these objects not to be propagated all the way to the final subscriber. My question there would be, how does the relay know what's the final subscriber or not, right? It's just forwarding it down. At what point does it know that this is the final subscriber or not?
Is this the second question?
Yeah.
What I was just trying to say, and what I think we actually agree on, is that we should not use this for anything that does not need to be read by a relay as a principle of spec, because I've seen some proposal for things like formats that put stuff into header extensions, which clearly should not go there.
Okay. So
and I think we should be extremely clear that we should not put things there unless we have a clear story of what relay is going to do with them.
Okay. For your suggestion for negotiate per subscription instead of per hop, that's very interesting. I think that makes a lot more logical sense than per hop. Your subscription then would have to create a field. You could put these types in there. And then the question is, what's the action to be taken, though? And again, how do we aggregate requests? If I have 1,000 people asking for something and they all ask for slightly different variants of it with these objects, do I have to create a dynamic superset? And if someone arrives after the fact and I've got one upstream request, I now have to open up a second one. So it would increase the cardinality of our upstream requests quite a lot if we have to negotiate. And then how much overhead? The overhead with a null object space is currently 1 byte per object. Okay, I have no idea. I was busy listening to Victor, so I don't know who was next in the queue.
The queue goes Suhas, Mo, Gwendol, Magnus.
Okay. Suhas.
Cool. I'll just have 4 points as well. On the use case, other than the one that you listed, one that we are using today in our implementation is for secure objects, where we need the key negotiation finds the key ID for a given track or something, and then that's the key ID has to go on the other end, so that the end subscriber can know which the key ID is indexed into the map of the symmetric key to use to decrypt. So we use that extension extensively today, and also we are also using lock. There's this debate about should lock be payload or header or not, but that's outside the scope of this discussion. So I see there's the use case for extensions. And on this question about is the requested extension negotiations needed or not, I think it also depends on what's the scope of an extension. If the scope of an extension is like end-to-end, then relays have to blindly follow it because relays does not know what to do with. On the other hand, if the scope of an extension is like hop by hop, in the case where there is an action that relay has to take on behalf of that extension, then the required extension is needed to know what to do with the extension or not. I would say, like, if you can, like there's some use cases like we want to add trace ID to see how the things go across the relay network, and those kind of extensions can have the property that can come from any contributor in the relay network. And having that extension hop by hop is because it's scoped by saying my relay 1 is this is my view of the traffic going towards you, and relay 2 will say its view of traffic going towards relay 1. So they are very hop by hop scoped extension, and any spec that defines that extension would also define what a relay should do. In that case, without having a negotiation to say do you support it or not, it will not work. So some kind of negotiation would be useful. But on the other hand, the KID extension, which we use as secure objects, is the original publisher and end subscriber property, and the relay doesn't have to know about it. In that case, you don't need a way to negotiate that one. Maybe adding a scope parameter would be useful in that case. Other than that, I would think that the extension should not be part of subscription, but it should be hop by hop as you have defined, along with the scope added. And on overhead, when there's no extension, I think that can be optimized. Alan has some good suggestions. I don't think so we should kind of spend too much time right now until once we figure out the framework, we can figure out the optimization. Yeah, that should be my thoughts on this.
Okay, was it Gwendol, then Mo?
Yeah, I don't understand why we would need to have this if the relay does nothing with it, but well, it's another question, I would say. The use cases I would consider is CMSD data, so typically a header that we want to transport from the publisher to the subscriber. But in that case, the relay should be able to add some information to it. And we don't necessarily want to reveal to the end user what is the information from the infrastructure. So I would like the extension to be discarded to the end users. I think it's possible to know from one relay to another if we are crossing some domains which are different, and it would make some security issues if or privacy issue if we reveal this to another domain. So for me, the must forward is very strong, and capacity to update the value of the extension is necessary. And the second one is more like a question. This one is, can we use it to transport WM pace info data for the watermarking solution for this? Even I don't claim that we should use this for watermarking, but this is typically information that the publisher want to transport with objects or with groups. And this is also something we don't want to disclose to the end user. So it's something that would make the relay process the extension. So this is exactly the goal of this, and to just discard this at the end.
So that third point you make about WM pace info for watermarking or AB watermarking, that I think that's valid. But what's common with your prior request is you're asking for the end relay not to actually forward these to the client, because so it's relaxing the must to a should for the propagation direct.
Yeah, you know, in a multi vendor pipeline, you don't want to reveal information from one vendor to another vendor. And so when you are at the end of a domain which is vendor domain, then you just discard the stuff.
Okay. I think Mo is next.
Yeah, I think there's a very fundamental point that we need to address first, which is, are these only for relay forwarding decisions? That was not my read of the motivation use cases for this, but it seems like that's what some people are. I think specifically Alan and Victor that I've talked to offline think that it should only be for relay forwarding extensions. If we go down that route, realize that every single object payload will have an extension header inside of it as well. You'll have object level extensions and you'll have relay forwarding level extensions. So is that really the path that we want to go down? I'm not so sure why the prohibition of this being a relay forwarding only extension makes sense. And there's a second problem with that, which is we don't even know that you're talking to relays. The protocol is designed to be so symmetric between publishers and subscribers, whether you're talking to a relay or not, that it doesn't really make sense. Like when Victor mentioned, trying to put this on a subscription, subscriptions are not end to end, right? You have no idea that your subscription is end to end. It's the relay, that you're talking to could be serving you that publication, or it could be 10 relays away from you. So I'm not clear on why we think that this somehow has any end-to-end properties that could be differentiated from the hot by hot properties by moving it to somewhere else. And so I also don't agree with the prohibition that this can only be for relay forwarding. I think that will force every single object format to have its own extension mechanism inside of it. I mean, this is media over QUIC. This is not QUIC. This is not web transport. You're not transporting a generic object. You're transporting media over QUIC. And certainly every media transport protocol has extensions. RTP has a ton of extensions, and most of them are for endpoints, not just for intermediate forwarding nodes. So I think when you look at the real use cases, a lot of them are going to be more about the end subscriber consuming this data than it is going to be about relays making forwarding decisions based on this data.
So I agree. This is a key question, and we should. I don't know what the chairs think, but I would like to not take new questions until we resolve this issue, because it's fundamental to the notion of extension headers. I hear what Mo's saying, that we should be able to put data. We should put metadata in the header about the payload. My personal opinion is I think it's preferential that we put that data in the payload. The reason is it's completely flexible. You don't have to change the transport protocol when you change your timing or your encryption or whatever other data you want to put in your header. It's a contract between the original publisher and the intended final subscribers. And I like separating it out into the payload portion, which is completely decoupled from the relays. And yes, there'll be a header and there'll be many different types, but from a mock transport point of view, it doesn't matter. There can be 1,000 ones. It's just moving payloads.
Then I would really like to see the motivating use case for relay-only forwarding decision extensions. I haven't seen a single one yet. I've read the 5G stuff. It doesn't make sense to me either. I haven't seen another motivating use case for a relay forwarding only extension. And required. It's still also not clear whether it's requested or required.
Okay.
Hmm.
Are there other opinions on this issue, or do we return to the general queue?
I think
I had
mine.
comments on this point, but I think if Magnus or Victor and
I want to talk. I can talk a little bit about the motivations and use case. I think I can. My plan here was to talk about the relation to this extra media use case, which is in this draft you referenced. I've been somewhat involved in this for another type of solution for this extent for singling. Basically, that case is really it's instructions to the network, in this the mobile network, to treat these set of basically video frames separately from something else, knowing how many packets belong to the video frame, etc., and translate that from the mock level to the network when it passes over the last hop to the consumer. And in this case, actually the relay itself will know that I'm consuming this because I'm the mobile network, I'm sending it over the last hop too. So in most cases, it would be, I know that I'm consuming this data and can therefore potentially remove it because it's those I'm the consuming and I'm not expected to see it further. There could be kind of contrived cases where you would have multiple links, further hops, but in relation to that aspect. So it is one case of something that is consumed by the relay, and the relay will do something differently, or at least tell someone else to do something differently with the set of packets that it will send out. Yeah, I'm done.
Alan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I think I was originally in this spot in the queue, but then when I
Okay, yeah, so we got back to
it like moved me around.
Okay.
So my thought of like whether it should be like for applications or not, like I don't think it should be for applications, because that same application, I mean, I hear most point that like everybody who's using payloads will then need a place to put their structured metadata. But I think that's also doable. But also, if we set up a system where you have to forward these things if you don't understand them, then there's like not much stopping an application from using them, like call it structured payload or something, right? Like I pick some random number, I stick something in there, and then relays are like, I don't know what this is, I'm forwarding it, and like, boom, it gets to the other side. So, I mean, I kind of see it as like, when people go to write extensions, you ought to be able to, and I think Suha said this too, you ought to be able to say in your extension, like, when a relay gets this thing, if you're a conforming relay, you will take this action, whatever it's logging it, or it's like changing something about the delivery or whatever. Like that's kind of the bar for like being in this part of the payload. And I don't want to spend time parsing out like what are the structured metadata for like application stuff in my relay, right? I just want to forward those bytes blind, and I'm not going to change them. I also, I mean, I think a couple of people said this too, but like the ability to remove an extension if you acted on it. I think that's what Magnus just said, and other people. It's just like, I'm a relay, I saw this extension, it's for me, I took whatever action it was I was supposed to take, and I don't want to like to send this thing any further. So like I kind of want that ability to remove it, but that opens a third problem that which is related to cacheability and the immutable object property of objects in mock, which is that like given a particular track and group and object, I have a unique idea of what is there. But now we have like variants of objects that have different extension metadata attached to them. So like whether you cache it or don't cache it is like weird, or like, oh, like here's a version that's like it's got 3 extensions, and here's a version that has 2 extensions. Do I cache them both? Like, how do I differentiate which one to serve? Like, so I don't have an answer to that. But I mean, it's just on the application. I don't think we should use this to convey application metadata, but I don't think we can really stop the arbitrary application from doing it.
Okay, who is next in the queue? Is it Victor or Mike?
It's Victor Mike Suas.
Yeah, I think there is nothing wrong with every payload format having its own header. I mean, I don't think RTP is any worse for having its own extension headers instead of putting RTP header into IPv6 options. I think this is like lets us clearly separate things that we want relays to look at versus things we don't want relays to look at. And object payload is just the general word, things we do not want relays to look at. And I think a lot of, and I feel like if we do this, is like we now have a lot of other problems. Like if the payload is end-to-end encrypted and headers are not end-to-end encrypted, then why and what do we gonna do about that? Whereas if you put your codec headers into payload, you just agree that like if you put encryption on top, your headers are always encrypted and you do not leak any metadata. And I feel like this kind of layering is good. And part of the reasons I'm reliant that MOQT is, you're correct, it's media, but it's also transport. And in general, transport protocols are in a position where as long as we do not understand the exact application we are doing, anytime we try to add value, this usually works out poorly. See, for instance, compression in TLS is a good example of where we try to add something that should not have been done, application abstract into a transport protocol, and that just led to problems. So I feel like in general, it would be best if we separate those concerns.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I want to echo what several others have said, that I think it's important to maintain this separation between things that belong in the payload that are application specific and things that are the concern of relays, and those go in, object headers. It's probably worth spending some time spelling out our expectations for immutability, for various reasons. But as an end subscriber, I want to know that I'm actually getting what the original publisher intended to send me and that it hasn't been modified, right? So somewhere in there, I might have, a signature on something potentially that could all be in the payload or whatever. But we should be clear about, what things can be mutated when and where. But what I actually got in the queue originally to say is just a minor naming thing. We were kind of drifting out of object extensions and discussing extensions. And I want to just note that there are other types of extensions that we may want to negotiate and set up parameters, for example. That would be, additional parameter support in control messages or additional control messages. And we should not expand what we're doing with objects into a namespace that, makes those things awkward to add later.
Yeah, Suhas.
Yeah, I'm trying to reiterate hearing all the points that we need a support mechanism or negotiation mechanism if the relays or next hop has to process it, as defined by the specification that defines the extension. If not, the relays should forward the extension as is. Especially in the case of when we are doing any kind of end-to-end encryption, the payload will be encrypted, so even the end user cannot parse it if it wants to decrypt it. So something that needs to decrypt should be outside and should be end-to-end authenticated. So that's the case where the that extension is scoped end to end in that manner. And if a relay changes it for whatever reason, it fails. It's a DOS attack in some form, right? So those are the cases where the extension cannot be part of the payload, even if it's a payload metadata, but it should be outside. In the same way, for some of the use cases in the 5G use cases they talked about, that relay is not a plain forwarding relay. It's not just doing blind forwarding. It's doing something on top of the extension it received. And in that case, that relay has to support that extension to do that kind of operation on top of that one. And when there's some application logic embedded in those kind of relays, if I'm assuming that's what their use case is all about. That's where the support extension comes in. And if there are extensions that on the immutability part of it, if there are extensions that have to be end-to-end scoped, then the immutability of the object comes with that extensions being cached as well. If the extensions are not end-to-end scoped, then you don't have to cache that extension. That would be kind of my delineation between what defines an object to be mutable, because no matter how many times you ask for that object, you should be able to perform the operation on that object to be useful at the end. And an extension is contributing to that one, that should be cached. If the extension is not contributing to that one because it's not scoped end to end, in that case, you don't have to cache it either.
Just a quick comment on your statement that we can't support end-to-end encryption without headers. You could easily put an in the clear header to your payload in your payload section, right? And this is in fact what we do with media. PSSH boxes are not encrypted, but the MDAT is encrypted. So
right, you can always define another payload header that looks like exactly the same place where the extension header is being there.
Right.
Like we're just defining another term. We can, I'm just trying to say, yeah, we can define an extension and we can define a payload header, which is not end-to-end encrypted, which is very similar to an extension again, and the payload. Instead of that, we have one mechanism that can work for both. That's my thinking. And that will let these applications like the use case that you referred in the first, the draft for the relay that's slightly more smarter to make further decisions on top of that with using the same mechanism.
Good. Alan.
Yeah, I think you said what I was going to say, which is like this, it's an attractive nuisance that like there's this thing that's exactly like what you want to need. It's in the clear and it's already structured and you want to put your data there. But whoever said it, like, yeah, like don't put RTP stuff in IP headers. Like just, it's not for you. Like Mach-T is for relays and caches. Like if it's not for relay or cache, it doesn't go in Mach-T. Like everything else goes in just like the word payload. It's not your payload. It's fine. It's Mach-T payload and you define your own payloads. If there's generic things like that, lots of people want their payloads to look a certain way, we can absolutely define a spec that's like, here's a common payload format, which has a in the clear part and an exception part, or whatever is useful there. But like, it's clear that if no relay ever needs to do anything besides take the bytes from one place and put them in another, then we don't need that.
Okay. Mo, we only got 2
No,
minutes.
I'm next. Well, I actually, it's kind of a chair interrupt. We have 2 minutes left. Will, do you have enough to go forward based on this feedback, or are you confused, or what?
No, I'm writing a lot of notes here. There is consensus around the notion that we can relax the must not modify to should not modify. And if a relay knows what it's doing, it can delete these extensions. I think there was agreement there. I have a note that the caching problem that Alan raised is a big one. Like if you got some objects that differ in their headers, are those contextually different objects? Do we have to hash the headers to describe the object? I think that's not addressed in the PR currently. And then we still have not resolved this notion of negotiation. Is it hop by hop or not? So I don't feel we have any sort of consensus with that.
Okay, so it sounds like you're going to make some changes to the PR, and that we need to iterate on some of these fundamental things. Where's the best venue to have this discussion continue? Is it the GitHub issue, or the PR, or somewhere else?
Well, we either have another session like today, or we queue this one up and we discuss it in person at the next interim, because there's clearly use case issues here.
Okay.
I'm happy to. I can make some changes, and we bring this up again.
All right. Can I offer a suggestion? Maybe you email to the list like a few short use cases or something, just to help people think about the problem. I mean, if you have one, that's great. If you have 4, that's even better. And they don't have to be like detailed documents, just kind of like, this is what we're trying to do kind of stuff.
I know Cisco has at least one as well.
Yeah. So it's not just a will, like Cisco.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't bring up this as a requirement, right? I just offered to write the PR.
Right. Okay.
I think if the chairs put out a request, please list the use cases. That may help answer some of the questions. If they require hop negotiation or not, then that might affect.
All right. Let me informally say that if you have a use case that could be served by this, like, please send an email to the list that describes it, and that will help this design. I think a lot of people are failing because there are no actual requirements we're trying to meet here.
Okay.
Mo, can you be very brief?
Yeah, just a final point about why this this should be something that caters to media, not just to transport. Groups have no meaning to the relays, right? We have groups in the protocol explicitly because it's an application construct that's relevant to media applications. We would have no need for groups if relays were just sending blind objects with no structure, with no concept of what the application behind it is. So there are elements of the MACH-T protocol that realize that what we're transporting is media. And we tried to abstract some things out, and that's good. But it doesn't mean that we kill things because they're not generic enough, not abstract enough. So I would caution against forcing every other payload form, every single payload format, object payload formats, to now have their own extension mechanism inside of them.
But Mo, MACH-T is not only for media. Like, we're using it for chats, and we're using it for clocks, and other people use it for other things.
And we agree that those are media-ish, and that groups have a relevant meaning for those things, right? But they don't have a relevant meaning for a relay. What does the group mean for a relay, right? It's not
groups like a retrieval point for a cache. I'm going to build up.
No. The cache is indexed based on the object ID and the group ID combination. Nothing to do with the group ID itself. There is no concept of a group ID in the relay that has a useful semantic. It's only for the applications that consume it.
We might have to take this conversation to the list, but I see some disagreement in the chat about that particular point.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for participating. We will meet again in 2 weeks. That's the 18th of December, and I believe we will then take a bit of a holiday interlude until January. So thanks again to everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.